Yo, what is good, everybody? This is Joey from the Heart Pirates TCG. What I have for you today is a 100% absolutely comprehensive masterclass guide on BOA Hancock. I'm going to be doing this for every leader that I feel like is relevant going into a tournament, a major tournament in OPO 7 format. So I have things like BOA Hancock, Bonnie, Enel, Red Purple Law, Red Purple Luffy. I have a lot of decks that are coming out. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting 5 of them on Patreon, and I'm going to be putting 5 of them on YouTube. That way I don't, gatekeep some of the content. But if you want some extra guides, feel free to, check out the Patreon for more of that. So I'm going to obviously put the decks that I'm going to be putting on Patreon on the screen right now. And while I do that, I'm also going to shout out my tournament. If you guys have ever gotten a top 64 or higher, or a certain rank on the rank simulator, I'm hosting One Piece's very own, very first pro circuit. And if you guys think you have what it takes to be the best player or trying to get some good practice into nationals, obviously join that tournament. There's going to be other great players like you fighting for really good prize support. So more information about that is going to be in the link below. So let's go ahead and get started. Actually, before we talk about the matchups, I want to talk about the pros of BOA Hancock, right? So BOA is a 5-life leader, which is obviously really, really powerful. It's incredibly tanky. It revolves around using the Reiju strategy back in OPO, was it 6? 5? What was Reiju? OPO 6? Yes, OPO 6. Where you basically counter out of every single attack and just keep a really high life count because you can keep drawing cards, and the cards that you the cards that you use for removal replace themselves, and then you can just keep doing it over and over and over again. Like I said, this deck plays 0 blockers because it is so tanky, and a lot of times you are at 4 to 5 life for pretty much the first 6 or 7 turns, and you don't necessarily really need blockers because you're bottom decking most of the cards that your opponent plays. And then, if they are dedicating Dawn to actually playing characters, they're not really attacking very tall. And then you can easily just like 2k out, or, maybe like Gum Gum Rain out of an attack. And then you can keep drawing cards to replace the cards that you use to counter. So that is a pro of this deck. Another pro of this deck, it has really strong matchups across the board. There's only a couple matchups that are completely unwinnable, but depending on the situation and what kind of is the most popular deck, BOA realistically could easily get a top 64, and it, with a little bit of luck, I could see it getting a top 16 if the matchups are favorable. Treat BOA like OPO4 Crocodile. If those of you guys who don't know, OPO4 Crocodile is actually how I got my first serial card, and I played 5 Whitebeards, which are pretty much auto wins into Crocodile, which I did win every single one of those. I played against 2 Grape Doffies and a Queen, which Grape Doffy was favored, Crocodile was favored into Grape Doffy, and then Queen was about a 50-50, and I played 1 Katakuri, and then obviously I lost that Katakuri. That was actually Michael Curry, the #1 yellow player in the world. He was my only loss when we were, I think that was round 6 when we were both 5-0 at that point. But because I played a bunch of favorable matchups, I was able to sneak into the top 8 and get my first serial when I got 7th place with my Crocodile. And you can do the very same thing with BOA Hancock. You just have to make sure you play into your more favorable matchups, right? So those are the pros of the deck. Let me talk about the cons real quick. The cons is this is not a black deck. I know I said that in another video before, but it's not a black deck, which means that you cannot establish a big board while also clearing a board, very similar to how you can with Sakazuki or Gecko Moria or Lucci, whereas they have access to Gecko Moria. They also have access to Rebecca Hina Lucci and other cards along those lines. And what they can do is they can not only clear a 10 cost character, but they can also establish at least two characters that are 5k or 6k or 9k attacks, and it's just really, really, really difficult to deal with that when you're a deck that literally has to spend 6 Dawn to clear 1 card, and that's just it's just not ideal. It's not ideal, and it does lose to decks that do heavily remove off of Gecko Moria. It also is really tough being a 5-life leader because Gadatsu hurts so much more, and because this is a mono blue deck, it doesn't have access to cards like Sabo to protect against Gadatsu, which is really rough from what I have seen. And then the final con of this deck is it does brick up a little bit, and sometimes if you don't see your top end early enough, the game can kind of get away from you. But other than that, I do believe in this deck. This, I will say though, this is probably the deck that I believe in the least to get a top 64 of all the 10 decks that I'm going to be posting on my Patreon. Like I said, I'm going to be posting 5 on Patreon, 5 on YouTube. So of all the decks that I'm going to be posting on Patreon and on YouTube, this is the one that I do think is probably going to be the hardest one to top with because of its auto losses into any black deck that plays that heavily removes off Gecko Moria. So we're not talking about Perona, we're not talking about Black Yellow Luffy, we're talking about Gecko, and we're talking about Lucci. Those two decks right there are going to be really annoying. And if you run in, like, you just have to pray that you don't run into like more than 2 of them, because like if you run into more than 2 of them, you literally cannot top, because I'm telling you that matchup is like, it's like literally like probably like 90-10 or 80-20. And like even if they're a bad player and you're a good player, it's still going to be a very uphill battle for you and still borderline unwinnable. So with that being said, we'll talk about the matchups. Okay, so we'll talk about the matchups, we'll talk about the auto wins, we'll talk about what we're favored into, we'll talk about what is an auto loss and what is an uphill battle. So for my testing, which I have been testing with my buddy Jesse Burrell, who is the regional champion from Arlington, Texas. He is a really good player and he's helped me test out all of these matchups pretty extensively. Also, all the gameplay that I'm going to be showing later on in this video is going to be matches against him after extensive testing against him, as well as against people on the simulator just in general. So the auto win matchups for BOA, if you play these matchups, then you are like a 90-10 or an 80-20 to win, is Black Yellow Luffy and Bonnie. I'll talk more about those. I'll talk more about those and why they're auto wins in a little bit, but we'll talk about the favored matchups now. You are favored, or you are either favored or highly favored and close to an auto win into 3 other matchups, which is Red Purple Law, Blue Doflamingo, and Perona. Now, in my opinion, if Perona does not play Stussy, it is much closer to an auto win, because it doesn't really have a whole lot of ways to remove your characters. If it relies more so on like the 10 cost Doflamingo, or it relies more so on the Wano engine but doesn't really play cards like Ice Age, and obviously, and like I said, no Stussy, then you are so much more favored, because like they're relying on like either like at this point 8 cost Kid or 10 cost Doflamingo, which you have a lot of answers to with Blue Luffy and then Red Rock. So we'll talk more about those matchups in a little bit, but our 50-50 matchups is we only have one, and it's the BOA mirror match, because it's obviously, you know, BOA is going to win once, you know what I'm saying? One of the BOA is going to win. So the unwinnable matchups, we have Gecko Moria and we have Lucci. Now of those two, Lucci is like almost like, I think Lucci's like a 99-1. Like it is so hard to beat that deck. Like I legitimately don't think it's possible to beat that deck unless they just severely mess up, or like your opponent just doesn't show up after 5 minutes and you get the free win. Gecko Moria is a little bit more doable because they don't have access to the stage, which is absolutely insane, by the way. For those of you guys, like, you guys want Sakazuki banned, like, because like it has so much cost reduction. Lucci has the most cost reduction in the entire game, and like nothing is safe. No 10 cost is safe. It's ridiculous. Anyway, Lucci's almost unwinnable. Gecko is a little bit more winnable. I would say it's probably 70-30 in Gecko's favor, but it's still not great. It's still not great. We'll talk more about those matchups in a little bit as well. The uphill battles. If you run into these decks, then it is an uphill battle. We are talking about Enel, and I was going to say Kaido. So guys, Purple Kaido is a deck that I have always believed in, and depending on the meta, I do think it can succeed at a regional level and get a top 64, but its matchups are very, like, it has to see basically all Enel. Purple Kaido does have a favorable matchup into Enel and like 1 or 2 other decks, but it's not really the most it's not really the best of decks. So I'm not going to include Purple Kaido as an uphill battle, because I don't think you're going to play a lot of Purple Kaidos in the regional. But I do think it potentially has potential. But I forgot one more thing. If Red Purple Luffy, if I end up doing a deck, if I find out that Red Purple Luffy is viable into this meta, I'll probably put that one either on YouTube or Patreon, like I said. But BOA actually is an auto win into that matchup as well. So keep that in mind. Okay. So enough yapping about the pros and cons, the wins and losses, blah, blah, blah. Now we'll talk about specifically the matchups. And then after I talk about this deck in particular, I'm going to be showing a matchup of me with some commentary of this deck. So it's going to be going by chapters, like I said. So if you guys want to skip around or come back to this, it's easier to kind of see these matchups and talk about like the specific tips and tricks and like, you know, the strategies into these matchups if you're able to kind of skip around. And I'm not going to just wait till the end to just put all the videos because that just doesn't seem that organized. So yeah, so we'll talk about Bonnie first. The reason that we have in my opinion, an auto win or very close to an auto win into Bonnie is because it's a very incredibly slow deck that relies on playing one character per turn and overwhelming your opponent by just resting characters every turn and building a board that most of the time they can't get rid of. Even black decks, a lot of times you can't realistically get rid of Kid very easily if you have a Rosinante on the board. So it's a lot easier to win the game against a variety of decks because they just don't have access to they don't have answers for Wall Kid, and they also don't really have answers for like 9-cost Zoro a lot of times, or like Doflamingo if you play it. It's just really powerful in that way. Also, Bonnie on before 10 Dawn, if you're worried about your opponent playing a Rush Ace, Bonnie can rest a what is it called? Rest a Dawn, and your opponent actually won't refresh it and they won't be able to play Rush Ace. So that's why Bonnie is incredibly slow. Like, that's its main strategy. But the issue is, like, they can't keep a character out on the board. Basically, like, except for the new Hawkins, but there is a way that I have found that actually plays around Hawkins. And the new Hawkins, for those of you guys who don't know, he's a 6-cost 7k blocker that says, like, once per turn, if you were to bottom deck it or remove it off the field by a card effect, then you can rest one of your opponent's characters instead. However, if your opponent doesn't have any characters or all of your characters are rested, then it cannot activate its effect because there's no characters to rest. It doesn't say up to, it says rest a character. So if you don't have a character, or like I said, they're all rested, then you can easily bottom deck the Hawkins, and then as well as something else with like Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, and you can pretty much just avoid all of the pressure that they have. If they try to play a Zoro, you red rocket, or you hit him with Luffy. If they try to play a Captain Kidd, you red rocket, or you know, something along those lines. So that is the strategy going into them. A tip going into this matchup as well is you need to save your red rocks. You absolutely need to save your red rocks for cards that actually matter. So do not red rock. I made this mistake early on, is I was red rocking like a Hawkins just because I could, because I didn't know that if you had characters on the board but they were just rested, you can avoid the effect. But you have to save your red rocks, and you have to save your Luffys, your blue promo Luffys, for 10-cost Doflamingo and Captain Kidd, because if you let them stick Captain Kidd to the board, they can hide behind, like they can just hide behind it for a long time, and then they can search with Bonnie and just play so many blockers that you literally cannot kill it by battle. And if you don't have anything to kill it by card effect or bottom deck it by card effect, you pretty much just automatically lose the game straight up. So some key cards in this matchup: you have 6-cost BOA, BOA Hancock. It you know, freezes a character in place. It also bottom decks cards like Bonnie. You have Gravity Blade Raging Tiger. You have Red Rock. You have Jinbei plus a Warlord, and then you have a Mihawk. Those are the most important cards in the matchup. So if you are looking for a mulligan hand, try to look for 2 to 3 of those at best, and then obviously you can go from there. Another thing about this matchup is you have to make sure that you do not go down too early, because go down in life too early. You want to counter out for the most part, but you also want to save enough counter to protect your Warlords, because your Warlords can put in a lot of pressure, because like I said, Bonnie can rest 1 character per turn. So if you have 2 or more characters on the board, like you're able to actually attack with like more than one of them, which is obviously really good, because you know, Bonnie is really good at just like slowing down the game state. But if you're able to like swarm the board with like Warlords and like Boas and like Mihawks, then like they can only rest one of them, which is, it's normally going to be like your Boa or your Mihawk, one of the two, and then your Warlords can chip in some damage and then take like 2Ks or 1Ks out of your opponent's hand. So with that being said, that is the matchup. Let me go ahead and jump into a gameplay of BOA into Bonnie and show you how it can be very free or highly favored if you draw well and then obviously, you know, play well. All right, guys, so I completely forgot to record the first 2 turns of this matchup, but pretty much nothing happened. He was able to keep Bonnie on the board, and I was able now to bottom deck it with BOA, so we're kind of starting off a little bit late, but I make a massive mistake in this game right here, and I'll show you why. And like, even though I did make a massive mistake this game, I was still actually able to win this game. All of these matchups I'm going to show you are, if it's favored, it's going to be of me winning. If it's not favored, it's going to show you me losing. So it's not really a spoiler. It's just like literally just what the video is about. So here's the mistake that I made. I didn't know at this point in the game that you could actually rest your characters and then it would bottom deck the Hawkins. So this was a massive mistake. This Hawkins shouldn't even be on the board. I should have double Warlord and BOA, and he should have nothing on the board, which is obviously massive, right? That's a huge play. But you know, that's a huge mistake. So do not do what I do, and do not fall into that play. Now he actually plays a Hody Jones right here, which is definitely really interesting. There was some dead air because we were just kind of thinking our plays through, but I skipped it a little bit. But swing 6 into life right here, and then I go ahead and I let it go because I don't want him to put a Dawn on Hawkins and swing into the BOA. Because I don't want him to, or I'm sorry, not on Hawkins, on Hody Jones and swing to the BOA, and me not have an answer for it. Now here's, because I had to do a weird play. I believe so. Actually, disregard. I didn't do the weird play here. I did not do the weird play here. I just played the Mihawk right here. I thought I was gonna do the weird play, but it's actually gonna come in play next turn actually. So he's gonna go ahead and block with that freaking Hawkins that shouldn't even be on the board, and I play a Mihawk, and this is where things start looking good. Like I said, guys, you're like, this deck can't really put a whole lot of pressure on you because you're just constantly at like 4 or 5 life the entire game, and like they just don't have a way to actually like end the game very early. It's not like Uta or Captain Kidd where like their leader just puts in a lot of pressure. They literally are just like a 5k leader attacking into you, and they have to save 1 Dawn up for the most part, unless they play like a Rouge or like some other card that like, you know, unrest Dawn. And it's a lot easier to be able to it's a lot easier to be able to like survive against Bonnie because they just don't have a whole lot of options to actually put pressure on you. So right here is where I do the very interesting play. This is like, I had to waste extra cards because I kept the Hawkins on the board, but because I was able to do this, but now that I figured out after he told me that if I don't have a character, if I have a bunch of characters rested, then I can kill the Hawkins. Here's actually what I decided to do. So I had to make sure one more time, make sure he wasn't trolling me. So I go ahead and red rock it, and I make sure I have enough Dawn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to red rock and bottom deck the Hawkins, and then I'm going to go ahead and play Luffy, and then bottom deck the what is it called? I'm going to play Luffy, and I'm going to bottom deck the Zoro. But I just had to double check that was the right play because I didn't want to discard a whole lot of cards. But that is the play. That is the sequencing too. So I red rock it, and then he goes ahead and bomb decks it because he just doesn't have a character to rest. And then I go ahead and play Luffy. Luffy trashes probably the Mihawk and probably the 2k counter because I want to keep the gravity blade just in case. And I draw a card off that. I'm able to swing 5. And this is where I can just control the board so well. I was very hesitant on using the red rock because I didn't want him to play Captain Kidd and just be able to like wall off behind it. But I figured like because I have gravity blade, I can get a whole lot of his I can get his blockers that he plays off Captain Kidd like away, and then hopefully draw into like another red rock or like another Luffy or something like that in the future. But I wanted to make sure that was the right call. Sorry, this deck does require a little bit of thinking because like it requires a lot of like resource management. So luckily I draw into the red rock right there, and for me I wanted to get rid of as many cards from his hand as possible. However, it looks like I didn't do that. I think I was looking for a Perfume Femur, actually. I was looking for a Diable Jumble, in case I did kill a kid. So, what I was looking for is, because I have the red rock in hand, I was looking for Diable Jumble. So if I red rock and he still has a blocker, I can just put it on like my Mihawk and swing for like 15k, and I probably just win the game. But unfortunately, I did not see the Diable Jumble. There are some matchups like where it makes me want to play 2 of them because it is literally like a free win. But like just having one makes your opponent play around it, and if your opponent's smart, they will play around it. And it makes it not nearly as good. It's just very, very similar to like Diable Jumbo in that way. So he goes ahead and plays a Bonnie. Bonnie's gonna like allow him to play a bunch of counter, or I'm sorry, be able to search for a bunch of counter and also hide behind the Kid wall. This reminds me so much of like OPO1 guys, where like I started playing Captain Kidd towards the end of the format. I actually really did love that deck. Like I love decks that require you to like resource, like conserve resources and like kind of think about like, you know, when to play these characters, when to take life, like, you know, what to rest. Like, there's a lot of like thinking behind Bonnie. I do think Bonnie is a high skill ceiling deck, so I definitely will be playing this deck on and off for a while. So he plays Bonnie, searches for a Bartolomeo. He plays another Bonnie, searches for a Apu, which is a 2K counter. Supernova actually does have 12 searchable 2Ks now. Or I'm sorry, 3 searchable 2Ks at least. So now Bonnie can literally never whiff unless you decide to play Ezo, which I don't think they do anymore because I think they value the consistency a little bit more. So he goes ahead and plays 2 blockers, one off of Kid and then one off of a Rouge. I'm sorry, one just hard plays a Rouge, and then I Gravity Blade, draw a card, and then I just get a bunch of counter out of his hand. The reason I Gravity Blade is because I feel like red rocking actually is not the move here. I'd rather, like, he has only 5 cards in hand, so if I swing 12, I'm gonna get rid of pretty much all of them anyway, and so it doesn't matter either way. I'm gonna get rid of the Bonnie just so he can't search another Kid, and then the game's pretty much over from here. He goes ahead and scoops, but yeah, that's the matchup into Bonnie. We'll move on to other matchups now. All right, now let's talk about our other auto win matchup, which is actually going to be Black Yellow Luffy. This is actually no surprise at all. I mean, Black Yellow Luffy obviously struggles into decks that remove cards, you know, bottom deck wise, which, you know, is Red Purple Law, Sakazuki, and now BOA. It also is just like weird because like you can starve them out, but you also have access to Pudding as well and multiple copies of Pudding. So this deck is just, it's almost a completely unwinnable matchup for Black Yellow Luffy because all of the bodies, like, you starve them out long enough, or if you don't starve them out long enough, you just play like, and you actually are aggressive in giving them cards as well as like them playing Flampe, you just hit them with like Pudding when they're at like 2 life, and they go down to 5 cards in hand, and then you can basically just like kill them with like a bunch of Warlords and like Mihawk, because a lot of times they'll either like just draw into a bunch of dead cards, and like they have no triggers that can really save them, and like they usually won't have counter to save them either after a Pudding, especially after you develop a board. And if you starve them out long enough, what's going to happen is you're just going to like put them in these awkward positions where like their geckos don't really do a whole lot, because like you bottom deck most of the cards that they play early, like they're like Luffy that gains 2,000 power and trashes their life. Obviously Sabo, like everything they have is 5 costs or less, which is perfectly in range of 3,000 worlds. It's perfectly in range of Gravity Blade Raging Tiger. It's perfectly in range of Mihawk. There's just a lot of cards that just like they just can't keep on the board, and like they're gonna basically have to play things from hand or play like these like really like weird cards that like don't really have a whole lot of value off of Gecko, if they even get to Gecko, and it's just awkward for them. Like them being a 7k leader or a 9k leader doesn't even matter too much, because once they go down to 0 life, you also have access to Diable Jumbo, and they have no removal for something like Mihawk or like 6 cost Boa Hancock, which is an 8k. So if you Diable Jumbo, you swing for like 18k into them, and then like they usually only have 4 to 5 cards in hand when they go down to 0 life, maybe even less than that sometimes. So you pretty much just like auto win. They're like, the deck has to play at 0 life, and like the fact that you have access to Diable Jumbo with like a really big character to like boost it on is just like I'm telling you guys, it's just unwinnable for them. So that's why I also really believe that BOA can get a top 64 if you see the right matchups, because Black Yellow Luffy is going to be a menace for both Lucci, I believe, and Gecko, from everything that I have seen, obviously because Sabo is just so powerful. So, you know, if you do run into like 3 Black Yellow Luffys or like 4 Black Yellow Luffys and like a Bonnie or 2, like you automatically have like 6 wins, like straight off, like straight up. You know, in a 9-round tournament, all you need to do is win 1 more and you get top 64. So yeah, that is Black Yellow Luffy. Let me give you a couple more tips into Black Yellow Luffy. You definitely want to go first in this matchup because you want to be able to play Gravity Blade Raging Tiger on curve. Some key cards in this matchup is obviously Perfume Femur, which is our Diable Jumbo, Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, Mihawk, 6 cost Boa. The Warlords don't really matter too much, so like realistically you can like, you don't have to play Warlords, especially since you are going first. You kind of just like do whatever until 7 or 8, like 7 dawn. Like on your 7 dawn turn, if they don't play anything like of value for, or like if they only have one character that you can't really get a whole lot of value off of Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, you basically just like freeze that character in place with a Boa and establish a body. And then if they play another character after that, that's when you Gravity Blade Raging Tiger or you play Mihawk. And then after you play one of those 2, if they play more bodies, then you just either Gravity Blade Raging Tiger or Mihawk. You know what I'm saying? Like whichever one you didn't do the last turn, you just do that now. And it's just you pretty much just win. Like I said, if you do have access to pudding, you can give them like 1 or 2 cards and like let them take their own life, and then obviously hit them with pudding. If you don't have access to pudding, just starve them out until you get pudding, and then obviously just bottom deck all of their stuff in the process, and then just pass. Like that is as simple as it can get. Another key thing is try not to get too low into this matchup, because they can put a lot of pressure on you, surprisingly, with like with like their ace, their Luffy, like their leader being like 9k, so they can realistically swing like 7 to 9k like 3 different times in a turn, which is really scary. So try not to go down to like too low in life early on, because they can actually like randomly lethal you out of nowhere if you're not careful. But other than that, like, this matchup is completely free, and here's a match of me playing against it. All right, guys, so I ended up going second in this matchup right here, in this video in particular, but I realized that was actually wrong, because the only reason you want to go second is because you want to actually, like, the only reason to go second is because you want to establish warlords that put like pressure on their life, or like put pressure on their field. But like, because this deck doesn't actually do anything realistically, then like all you're realistically doing is like doing nothing with like those characters that you establish. So there's no point of actually going second in this matchup. So I go ahead and play a warlord, and then I go ahead and play Law, and then Law goes ahead and puts a card to the bottom of his deck. If he has 6 or more, and then he goes ahead and plays Luffy, and then he passes. Now I do have 6 Dawn at my disposal, so I think the best play is just to play another Law. Funny enough, I decided to go a little bit more aggressive into his life here, because I want him to think that I have pudding. I was debating, and I was like, yeah, I think pudding is actually the better call here. So he takes this life, or I try to bait him into taking this life right here, but he ends up countering out of it, which is, I think, smart, because if he does that, like, if he does take this life, then he goes to 7 cards in hand, and then I can just pudding him for free. Which is obviously a -2. So if he does value the cards he has in his hand, which he does have Sabo and Hiyori, which are 2 good Gecko targets, then it is smart for him to counter out of here, especially if he has a Gecko in hand, because that card's not searchable. So if you have a Gecko, then you definitely want to keep that in hand. So like, you want to kind of deter me from like kind of going into pudding right there. So he's able to keep the Luffy out on the board. Luffy's able to trash a card, draw a card, swing 8k into life. I believe I do take this one, or I think maybe I counter out, actually. Yeah, I counter out because I don't want to go too low early on, like I said, because this deck puts a lot of pressure on your life, and I just don't want that to be the case for me. And yeah, there's a little bit of thinking involved. Black Yellow Luffy is definitely one of the harder decks to play. I think like the top 5 hardest decks to play is like, I don't know all of them, but like, I think Black Yellow Luffy is one of them, Sakazuki is one of them, Red Purple Law is one of them. And like, there's like a few other decks that require like a lot of thinking and like sequencing and stuff like that. So yeah, there's definitely some thought process that goes into this. And good thing that I did counter out of this 8k, because he's swinging 8, 8, 8, and I counter out of both. And then here's where I just Gravity Blade Raging Tiger and just utterly massacre him right here. And I think I just passed because I want him to take his own life. That way he doesn't like he has to dedicate a card out of his hand to take his own life. And obviously, at that point, he has 1 less card in hand, and then obviously it doesn't really matter if he does take his own life or plays Sabo, because I'm just gonna go ahead and play my Diable Jumble and then just basically kill him from there. So he's gonna go ahead and play Garp. Garp's gonna be able to search for something, some type of big brother or little brother, and then the second that he takes his life and goes down to 0, then he just pretty much just automatically loses. I'll show you that. There's not really a way to play around it, personally. Even if, like, I think the best way to play around this is to like leave 1 life face up, just as like a buffer, but still, like, that's not really getting the best use out of like your cards. So he plays with 2k counter, and then he goes ahead and just like uses his leader effect to like play 2 characters. So I think he plays like Sabo and Sabo and Luffy or something like that. Not entirely sure. I think what he wanted, I don't think it mattered either way, because even if he needed to play 2 characters anyway, because like I can kind of like math him out. So I think he was trying to play blockers. Yeah, I think he was trying to play blockers here, because I can math him out. He's only a 7k leader right now. So if he plays Egghead, or he plays Egghead Luffy and pops one of my guys and then plays Sabo, he has 2 blockers that can't be KO'd, which is nice, but I still like, I have 2 character attacks, so like it doesn't matter either way. Then I go ahead and I have the 3000 Worlds which is nice, and then he plays Sabo, and then he just discards 2 cards, and I hit him with the Diable Jumble, and the game's pretty much over. But yeah, guys, this match is like straight up like unwinnable for this leader. Yeah, it's just pretty much straight up unwinnable. So yeah, that if you run into a lot of these decks, then you definitely are going to top a regional. So we'll go to the next deck. All right, guys, the next deck we're going to talk about is going to be Perona. So Perona is one of our favored matchups. It is not an auto win, but it is with certain builds, it can be close to an auto win, if not an auto win. It just depends on the build that they're playing and the cards that they are running as big guys. Because I will say Stussy is a very, very, very scary card because obviously it just answers Mihawk while also building a board, which is really scary. But if they are focusing on the Gecko Moria into like something like 8-cost Kid or Doflamingo, I think I said this earlier in my video. This is a long video, by the way. If you guys like this video, please give it a like. That would mean a lot to me, right? But you know, if they are playing cards that don't KO our big guys can pretty much stick for the entire game, and we should be good to go. This deck, it's one of those cards, or it's one of those decks that just always has 10 or 12 cards in hand, because they do play cards like You Can Be My Samurai. They play just a lot of cards. Honestly, they play a lot of cards that draw cards. Some of them play a Nupe. It's normally a very consistent deck, and it will see most of its pieces. However, it has a hard time putting cards in the trash. So like they have to counter with some of these cards to actually get value off them off Gecko Moria, because with the new Otama from OP07, they're just bottom decking their cards. With Momonosuke, they're bottom decking their cards. Like, they're not actually putting cards in the trash. So like, if we're not putting cards in the trash by KOing them and we're bottom decking them, then their Gecko Morias are not really going to receive a whole lot of value. And then if they're relying more so on Gecko Moria, like I said, they're not killing our BOAs sometimes, and most of the time they can kill our BOAs, but most of the time they're not killing our Mihawks, and our Mihawks are going to stick. And this is like a 4-life leader, obviously, so like it's easier to kill them by just like chipping away at them with like your warlords and things like that. Also just bottom decking all of their stuff, you know, resetting their hand. Like, their whole thing is like card advantage, right? So like, if you just reset their hand to 5 with pudding, like, they have to like play it super weird where it's like they want to draw cards, but at the same time they want to keep their hand relatively low. But like, once they're gonna get to the point where like, if You Can Be My Samurai, like, they're gonna have like 8 or 9 cards in hand pretty much the entire, like, at one point of the game, and then that's when you hold the pudding for and you just drop it and reset it completely, and then you can like red rock their Gecko, and then pretty much the game is pretty much just back into your favor, and you can keep chipping away at them with like 5Ks, 6Ks, and eventually they're just going to die. They are just going to die. A lot of times they also bottom deck some of like their big cards, like, you know, with Otama and Momonosuke searches, they usually bottom deck like Geckos. They usually bottom deck Stussies because they're not actually searchable. So you know, obviously they're Doflamingos as well. So like, this deck can brick really heavily on top of it, just like, you know, not being able to establish like what it wants to do with like card advantage. It is a favored matchup for us, very, very much so, and I would be very confident going into this matchup, you know, 10 times and feeling confident I can win 8 of those, you know what I'm saying? So this deck, ideally you want to go second. This is a deck where you want to, obviously Perona is a deck that obviously wants to go second. Pretty much since the deck came out, it wants to go second. And if you steal that from them, you can establish 2 bodies at the same time. You can play Jinbei plus Warlord, which is obviously really powerful. Then you can follow that up with your 6th on turn playing BOA, and then BOA freezes a character in place and then bottom decks one of their Otamas, and you get to draw off of that. It's just really powerful. It's really, really, really powerful. So with that being said, you want to go second. Key cards in the matchup, you're talking about Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, you're talking about Jinbei plus Warlord, you're talking about Mihawk, and you're talking about BOA Hancock. Those are your 5 cards that you realistically want to that you're looking to get in your opening hand. If you don't get all of those in your opening hand, you're looking for 2 or 3 of those at the very least. And then obviously pudding is a very, very, very key card in the matchup. You don't have to see it right away. You can draw into it. Sometimes you can bomb deck it off of Sengoku, which does make it tough. So I would say, if you do have a pudding plus like 1 or 2 other cards, I would absolutely keep the hand just so you have the options. If not, if you don't have pudding, temporarily you can probably use like 2K counter law, but that's not nearly as good in my opinion. So I would look for pudding in your starting hand, as well as Jinbei plus Warlord, and then hopefully you can draw into something like your BOA Hancock. So with that being said, let me go ahead and show you guys a matchup of Perona versus BOA. All right, so BOA versus Perona. I choose to go second, of course, because this is this is a really good going second hand. As you guys can tell, I do have pudding and I do have one of the warlords, so I did end up keeping that, even though I didn't have something else, because the pudding is very valuable in this matchup. Plus I have something that could search for a Jinbei on curve, as well as 1 other draw potentially, or technically 2 draws, because I have 2 draws per turn and the Sengoku. So I'm likely to find a Jinbei, and even if I don't find Jinbei, it's not the end of the world. So I go ahead and search for the second best card, which is obviously BOA Hancock. So now I have most of the cards that I need to be able to actually, put in a lot of pressure on the Perona. He goes ahead and rests the Sengoku and then pops it or swings into it with the Perona. He does that because if you can be my samurais, then obviously I'm going to be able to just swing into one of his characters for free. If I attack into it with my leader or like any of my other characters that are actually big, then they're basically pseudo blockers, which he'll take, but he doesn't want me to kill them for free, which I totally understand. Then he plays double Otama and Momo, so it's going to be really tough for him to actually, for me to actually clear this board. I know for a fact that this what is it called, Momonosuke is going to die because I'm swinging 5 into it, and then I'm going to play a 4/6 vanilla. Like I said, if you do play Weevil, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's just like I feel like I just always like have it like dead in hand, and like the only time I want to play it is like on 4 Dawn or like off of Jinbei, and like sometimes you just don't go, some matchups you want to go first in, so like it's just like weird to play it at that point. So he goes ahead and swings 6 into me, and then I go ahead and he plays a 5/7 vanilla. I go ahead and swing 5 and then 6 because he just doesn't really have a whole lot of and he's also playing in a pudding here. He doesn't really have a whole lot of pressure that he can put on me. He also doesn't have any triggers that he can kill, like he can KO a 4 cost. So I'm not really too worried about like attacking with my character first. So that's why I attack with my character first, even though some of you guys might think it might be a missequence, but it's not. Certain decks just don't have triggers. Like this deck does not play Punk Gibson, so like I just know for a fact if they play Punk Gibson, they play Punk Gibson. But I'm gonna sequence correctly because like I'm not gonna play around a trigger that they are like 99% not gonna have, most of the time not gonna have, if that makes sense. So very, very excited. I'm actually very excited about this video, guys. Like I think this is probably gonna be the best video I've ever made, and I'm very excited to put this on Patreon. I'm very excited to put this on YouTube as well. So not this in particular because this is going on YouTube, but my other decks are going to go on Patreon. So this is where the deck kind of falls apart a little bit, is like it just like doesn't really do a whole lot in the early game. So he goes ahead and plays a Sabo. Sabo draws 2, trashes 2, and then it protects him against KOing effects. But obviously this deck bottom decks, which is a huge problem. If I had a Gravity Blade here, the game would pretty much be over like on the spot. But honestly, the game is pretty close to being over anyway, because it's just like, like what is he going to do? Like there's not really a whole lot he can realistically do to get rid of some of these characters, like I said. And especially if I go Mihawk, or actually I'm going to 8 Dawn, so I can't play Mihawk here, but like I have access to 3000 Worlds, I have access to Red Rock, I have access to Pudding, so like realistically I could put in a lot of pressure into his life right here. So he's gonna go ahead and swing 6 into the Perona, and I go ahead and discard a Gion because it's just not as valuable here, and I go ahead and I use 3000 Worlds, and I bottom deck his Yamato, because if he blocks with the Sabo, I realistically don't care. Like he has to attack with the Sabo, and if he attacks with the Sabo, then he's no longer a blocker, so it's pretty much the same thing. And then I draw, funny enough, off the 3000 Worlds, I draw into a Gravity Blade Raging Tiger. So he swings 7 into the Sabo, and I'm like, I actually just don't give a fuck. I'm gonna swing 8 into your life and make you just give me a bunch of 2k counters, and I'm gonna swing 8 again. And he's going to give me, I think, 2/2Ks here. And like the reason I don't swing into the Sabo is it becomes a pseudo blocker at the end of the day. And because I have the Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, it doesn't matter what he plays because I can just bottom deck the Sabo the next turn. So like realistically, if I can punch into his life, and then I can also make him respect the Diable Jumble that I could potentially have in hand. So like he can't go down to 0 because he just straight up loses. So he has to give me a bunch of cards, whereas Sabo, he can just let it go. So that's why I decided to actually give attack into his life, because the Sabo doesn't matter because I have removal for it plus something else next turn. So he goes ahead and plays You Can Be My Samurai, draws 2 cards. That card is actually insane. Funny enough, my Discord, if you guys are not in it, since the beginning of the Discord, like since the beginning of time since my Discord's been created, the profile picture has been You Can Be My Samurai, because 1, I consider all of you guys my samurai, my fellow friends in my Discord, and 2, I've always loved that card. I've always tried to make that card work, and it's just funny, bro. It's just really funny. I forget what I do here from this situation. I think I end up like red rocking and then Pudding, maybe. I think I just take this. Oh man, yeah, take this and I trigger into a Sabo, and the game's pretty much over from there. So I go ahead and swing 9 into life. If he takes it, then he's pretty much dead. So he has to give me a bunch of cards from his hand, and then if he doesn't take it, then I can just red rock and then play a body and then just like pass, and it's just really powerful. So he discards 3 cards to get out of that. And then I go ahead and play. Oh no, I remember what I do. I play a Sengoku and search for a BOA, and then BOA freezes the. That's so nasty, bro. BOA freezes the gecko, and then I can bottom deck the Otama, so he can't really get a lot of value from the You Could Be My Samurai. God, bro, this deck is just, and look at this. I still have 4 life. Like, and it's not because like this guy obviously is a very good player. He's a winner of a regional. It's just like this deck is just so favored that it's just hard. Plus, he like bricked a little bit too, which is a big problem with Perona, and that's why I say this deck is just so much so favored into Perona, because it just like doesn't really do a whole lot to actually like put pressure on you, and then you have so many answers for like what they can do that it just doesn't feel like it's very winnable for them. But he goes ahead and plays Ice Age, and then he rests the BOA. Most decks actually, I didn't know that this deck actually was playing Ice Age, which does suck, but he ends up just playing Ryuma and then just like scooping anyway because the game's pretty much over. But yep, that's it. I can just swing 7/7. We'll go to the next matchup. Now let's talk about Red Purple Law. Red Purple Law is a favored matchup if you know how to play it. Now, it did take me a little bit to figure out this matchup because this is really tough, and it's very different from Sakazuki, because Sakazuki, you cannot starve them out of resources, because if they draw Reiju, then they're just going to just kill you, because there's no way you can survive just a bunch of like draw power on top of starving them, and you're kind of on a clock. But because this matchup, obviously with BOA Hancock, you have 5 life and you counter out of almost everything early on, and you have a bunch of triggers that can bottom deck their stuff, that you can actually very much win this matchup if you do 2 things. 1, you have to starve them out of resources. And by starving them out of resources, I mean you literally do not attack them until you have 2 or more characters on the board, right? So once you have 2 or more characters on the board that you are completely established, as in like you play, let's say like a 4/6 vanilla and then like a BOA Hancock. After that, once you play that 3rd character, and you can constantly have 2 characters on the board at a time without being like scared of like all of them getting removed, that's when you can start attacking, right? So like once you have like a 4/6 vanilla and a BOA, once you drop the Mihawk, that's when you attack with them, right? Or once you drop another BOA, that's when you attack with the other 2, right? That's when you can attack and stop starving them out of resources. But the reason that this deck is so favored into Law is because if you starve them out of resources, they have to see multiple Reijus to even like remotely get close to being able to like, you know, stay in the game. And then 2, because you counter out of stuff so early on, it's just really difficult for them to actually be able to like go for lethal later on, and it also nullifies their Kitten Killers because they legitimately just don't have the Dawn most of the time to like attacking heavily into you, and you can easily just 2k counter out or 1k counter out because almost your entire deck is full of counter, and then you can obviously draw once you remove their cards and like keep up that counter sustain. So that's obviously huge right there. Another thing too is like you have access to Gravity Blade Raging Tiger. So Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, if they try to do the strategy where they just like conserve a bunch of Dawn and try to go like very aggro into your life with like really tall attacks, like 9k attacks, that means they're not actually using their effect to flood the board, and that's when you can just use like single removal like 3000 Worlds or like BOA Hancock or like Mihawk, and like be able to just like either stun their board, bottom deck their board, or like just like gain control of the board. And the thing is too, like your top end like Mihawk and BOA, they usually need like they need 2+ cards to get rid of it. So they need like double Gordon to get rid of Mihawk, and then they need Gordon plus Law to get rid of the BOA. And a lot of times when you're starving them out of resources, they just don't have that. So like once you can establish like 2 high cost characters, there's like no way they can get rid of both of them, and like at best they can get rid of one of them, and usually at that point they're pretty close to dying anyway, because like the second you start actually like giving them cards, like they're already within lethal range because like you already have like 3 characters on the board. So like if they remove one of those characters, you still have 2 more characters plus your leader, and then you can literally like math them out of the game if they don't play a blocker. And if they play a blocker, they're usually not playing aggro. Even if they do play a blocker, you have 3000 Worlds, you have Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, so it's just a favored matchup in that situation right there. So with that being said, let me talk a little bit more about like the key cards in this matchup, and then we'll talk about and then we'll go to a game. So the key cards in this matchup, like I said, you want to go second, right? So that's a key, you know, tip right there. But Warlord plus Jinbei is really important. Gravity Blade Raging Tiger is really important. BOA Hancock is important, as well as Gravity Blade Raging Tiger. I know I said that twice, but that's how important the card is. If you have 2 Gravity Blade Raging Tigers, there's almost no way they can out sustain like the amount of removal you have, because eventually, like between like, if you double Gravity Blade them, they're going to be like, and also starve them, they're going to be very, very, very low on like cards in hand and cards on board. So like the second you drop like another BOA, if the first BOA that you drop doesn't stick, or like, you know, if it doesn't stick, the second you drop another BOA or a Mihawk, they're going to be only have like 2 cards in hand, maybe like 3, maybe probably 2, maybe 3 cards in hand. And then of those 2, they have to be like Gordon plus, like either Gordon if it's a Mihawk, or it's like Gordon plus Toy Law plus like something to like help them ramp, or like a Reiju to like deal with that second big character, which is just normally not the case, right? Even if they do deal with that character, like you can just play, you know, you can recycle like your warlords off of Gecko Moria, and then just like keep just like out sustaining them, and eventually you will win, because they just don't have the gas to keep up with you. And it's the second you start like establishing like 1 or 2 bodies on the board and starving them out, you're gonna put them at 1 life, and then like they better remove your entire board or establish blockers that, you know, that can't get bottom decked somehow, and then you pretty much just win from there. So that is the strategy. Those are the key cards for this matchup. Let's go into the gameplay. All right, so go ahead into this matchup. We have, luckily we draw into another Sengoku. So we search, unfortunately do bottom deck both our Gravity Blade Raging Tigers, which does really suck. It really sucks. He's going to go ahead and swing 8 into life here, which we're going to go ahead and take, unfortunately. He's not going to use his leader effect, which I think is totally fine. I'm going to go ahead and play Jinbei, and then Jinbei is going to play a Gecko Moria, which is just dead pretty much as soon as the it comes out. So I go ahead and counter with the Crocodile in case I do play a Gecko next turn, and then I can get it back. He goes ahead and plays Queen. He's going to go ahead and discard something, and then probably follow up with a Sachi and Penguin, because if he didn't, then he would be going very low in Dawn, and you want to stay ideally at 5 Dawn active for those of you who play Red Purple Law. So he goes ahead and discards an Ein, bottom decks that, yep, plays a Sachi and Penguin, and then here is my chance to go ahead and just go ahead and play a BOA. And BOA freezes. I'm going to freeze the Sachi and Penguin to force him to attack with Queen. I'm going to bottom deck my own Sengoku and then draw a card off of it. So it's going pretty well so far, even though I don't have Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, which does suck. Most of the time, the first time you play BOA, they are going to have an answer for it. So I don't remember if he has an answer for it or not, but usually they do. So it's definitely something that I'm worried about. I looked at my notes real quick. I'm going to fast forward it a little bit. You hear a little bit of a delay in this. It's because, like, I don't know why, but my software is like lagging right now, but I go ahead and counter out with a 2k counter to save the Sengoku in hand, just in case I need to search for like another BOA. And he does have double raise max to deal with the BOA. Like I said, they usually are able to deal with the first one pretty well. It's just unfortunate, but I go ahead and swing 6 into his Queen. And this is where I say he's starting to run out of gas. If you don't see Reiju, then you're pretty much just dead. So I swing 6 into Queen, 6 into Queen, and then I go ahead and freeze. I think I freeze the Ein. I bottom deck my own Sengoku, and I draw a card off that. And like one more turn after this is when I can start actually like applying pressure. At this point right here. So if he turns his character sideways, I can pretty much just wipe them. And if he doesn't turn his character sideways, then I can pretty much just wipe them. So like, it doesn't really matter too much. He swings 7 into my life here, and I'm going to go ahead and take it. Cause like I want to save this, Jinbei if he swings into it, but he swings 8 into life here. I go ahead and counter out of this because I want to be able to get my leader effect to draw. So I don't really necessarily need the counter in this match, or I don't really realistically need all to stockpile all the counter. So I go ahead and play Sengoku, and then I go ahead and search for a 2k counter. I swing 5 into his guy. I bottom deck his Sachi and Penguin, and then I swing 5 into his life, which he's probably gonna have to take, and then I swing 8 into his life, which he's probably gonna have to take. And this is where I say like they're already in lethal range, guys, is because if they don't get rid of like my Mihawk or my BOA, then if I bottom deck like his blocker, then I pretty much just like have not the math, but like I can pretty much take every card out of his hand and put him at 0, and I'm still at 3 life with a ton of counter. So this is why I say like if you just starve them out initially, there's like almost nothing they can do. They have to see like a bunch of Bon Clays early on to like get out of the BOA, and then they also need to like see like Rejuice, like, and they just don't really necessarily have that on curve. You pretty much can just take over the game before, and like once they run out of gas, they run out of gas, and there's nothing they can do. So he goes ahead and plays the Reiju, draws 2 cards, which is obviously very good. Is he going to use his leader effect? I'm not entirely sure. I think he probably should. Yeah, I was gonna say just play a body, Kid and Killer, swing 5 into me. Obviously, Kid and Killer doesn't really do a whole lot in this situation right here, which is just powerful. I draw into the Gravity Blade, which is nice. Or I think I drew into it last turn. So I played Gravity Blade, bottom deck, both of those guys right there. I think, yeah, I swing 6 into Killer. He counters out of this one, and I swing 7 into Killer, and then he goes ahead and takes it. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I remember what happened, but the game's almost over. So I swing 7 to the Killer, he lets it die, and then I put him at 0, and there's just no way that he can actually win this game. So, yeah, it's, and this is what I mean. Like, it's just like they're already in lethal range, and it's just hard for them to actually get out of this. So this is why I think this deck is favored, into this matchup. So, BOA does have 5 or 6 matchups that realistically are winnable. You know, and if you run into those, you can absolutely, you know, either if you only run into those, you can win a tournament. And if you run into like 1 or 2 of your bad matchups, then you can get top 64 easily, maybe even top 32, depending on tiebreakers and whatnot. So at this point, there's just not really anything left for him to do. Even if he establishes double blockers, I still have 3,000 worlds. So the game's pretty much over at this point. I'm going to counter out the last couple attacks, and then I'll go ahead and get to the next matchup, guys. All right. So those are all of the winnable / you know, auto win matchups. I'm sorry, those are all of the favored / auto win matchups. We're going to talk about the winnable matchups, but very unfavored. And the first one that we're going to talk about, actually, I think the only unfavored one that I can think of right now that you'll see a lot of, and this one's not an auto loss. This one isn't just an unfavored one, is Enel. Right. And I think I talked about this earlier in the video. I don't know. This has been a really long video. So Enel, if they see the cards they need to see, the game like is almost an auto loss. Like if they see Gadatsu into like ace, there's nothing you can do, right? But if they don't see Gadatsu, then there is a chance for you to absolutely flood the board if they draw bad and then you draw well, right? So basically, let me give you some context, right? So Enel doesn't literally, like, it just doesn't do anything unless they play like the Sky Island package, which most of them don't actually play anymore. But if they play the Sky Island package, then they can do stuff, you know, early on in the game. But most of the time they don't actually play the Sky Island package. So the best thing they have is on 5 Dawn, they play Gadatsu, right? And because we are a 5 life leader, we are heavily influenced and affected by Gadatsu. So even if we do take our first life, we can't play around them popping our warlords. So that does suck. So the route to winning is they don't have Gadatsu, and then if they do have ace, then like it only kills 1 body, and usually hopefully at that point between pudding and maybe even like our law, we can put them very low on cards, or they have a lot of bricks, we can put them very low on cards and keep swinging 5s and just get a bunch of cards out of their hand. That would be great, right? On top of like removing their bodies and drawing cards. The key to this matchup is just playing Jinbei plus Warlord, and just hoping to go as wide as possible. You're literally trying to play this deck like Doflamingo at this point, where you're just trying to establish as many bodies on the board as possible and remove whatever they have, so they can't actually touch your warlords. The thing is, a lot of these guys, they don't like they can't actually kill them by battle, because like you just have the counter for it, and a lot of times they play on curve, right? So a lot of times they're just like not really using a lot of their Dawn, or they're using all of their Dawn to play characters, so like they don't actually have a lot of Dawn to attack with, so you can easily counter out. A huge problem though is, you know, between Gadatsu and Yamato, they are able to pop like your characters pretty much for free. Like you're pretty much like your BOA Hancock is pretty much always within like Yamato range, because they can always pop a 6, because you're going to be staying at like probably staying at like 3 life against this deck, and then they're probably going to be at like probably 3 life as well, and then, you know, you're just going to get cracked by what is it called? By Yamato. Now the trick to playing around that is to go to 3 life and to put them at 2, but it's hard to put yourself at 3 life, because like, you know, once they start dropping aces and like Yamatos, if you can't get them off the board, then like they're just gonna put pressure on you, and like you're just gonna just straight up lose. But yeah, like I said, the trick is to steal going second from them, play Jinbei Warlord plus Jinbei Warlord, and then just keep trying to aggro them down, go down to 3 lives and put them at 2 life, so that the Yamato can't pop your BOA Hancock. That's the best thing that you can possibly do. Unfortunately, you're not really going to be getting your draw effect a whole lot with this matchup off your leader, because you need to go down to like 3 life early on, so they can't pop your BOA Hancock, and hopefully your BOA Hancock can stick in that way. And just keep aggroing them down with 5-6k attacks and like develop a board in the process, and then that is the key to winning. I will say that, you know, if they do end up trying to play, like if they try to counter aggressively or semi-aggressively to play around pudding, then your pudding is like already doing its job without actually like investing the Dawn into it, and it can realistically be a 1k counter. It also makes them very hesitant on actually like triggering into cards like Shirahoshi, because if they already have like 6 cards in hand or like 7 cards in hand, if they trigger into Shirahoshi, then, you know, they're going to go to 9 cards in hand, and then obviously pudding just does the work from there. So like, you know, try to attack like before investing your Dawn, because like if you still represent pudding, then like they will be hesitant on playing Shirahoshi, and also if you represent pudding, they will counter, and then they won't have a whole lot of cards in hand, and that's where you can just, your 5s will really start putting in a lot of work, because if your 5s keep taking 1 card out of their hand every single turn, and they can only kill 1 per turn by like card effect pretty much, because like they can pop it with Yamato or like maybe kill it with Ace or something like that, or maybe Gadatsu, then like if they don't have Gadatsu on curve, at least. If they have Gadatsu on curve, you're just completely fucked. But if they don't have Gadatsu on curve, the best thing they can do is kill it with Yamato, and then swing into it with Ace, and then like you still have a bunch of characters left, and if they have very low cards in hand, you can just keep swinging 5s and 8s and things like that with BOA, and you should be able to win the matchup. But it is very, very, very unfavored in my opinion. If they draw the cards that they need to draw, the matchup's unwinnable. But if they don't, and the deck can brick a lot because it doesn't have searchers, then you do have a chance. So that is why I put it in the unfavored but winnable category. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and show you the matchup and how I actually ended up winning a game. Now we ended up playing 5 games. Jesse won 3 of the games, and like those 3 games weren't even close, and the 2 games that I won were completely blowouts, and they weren't even close because I was able to see the cards I needed, and he was not able to see the cards he needed, basically Gadatsu, and that is literally the only way you can beat this deck. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and watch the game. Alright guys, like I said, this is the only way you can actually win this matchup, is doing exactly what I did right here. So he swings 8 into life here. He goes ahead and counters out to basically play around the pudding, and I go ahead and play Jinbei plus Warlord, which, you know, is the route, and then him not having Gadatsu is like the only thing that can save me, because then I can actually put some type of pressure on his life. Which is, I'm telling you, literally the only way you can win. So I think he ends up just like, I don't know if he ends up just like passing here with like 5 Dawn. Like he literally just, I don't think does anything. Yeah, he just passes. I swing 7 into life here, and he goes ahead and takes this one, and it allows me to play pudding because I don't have any other plays anyway, so I might as well just play pudding to get the value off it. I hit him for 1 damage. He's debating a trigger, I think. I don't know what he's debating on. But he ends up not triggering it. Oh, he triggers into the Frankie, and then I go ahead and play pudding. I swing 5 into his life, and then I swing another 5 into his life. And this is the route, guys. It's just keep going wide with a bunch of 5s, and then eventually you can crack through. This is literally how you play red purple law into this matchup as well. Just go aggressive until like go aggressive, and then like hopefully you can get them down to 1 before they hit like 7 or before they hit 9 Dawn, and then you can kind of aggro him out from there. So he's gonna swing 5. I'm going to go ahead and discard. Luckily, I counter out with the right card here. He swings 5, 7 Dawn. I'm like, I've seen people play that freaking vanilla before, so I want to make sure I have some answers for that. And I go ahead and counter out with the Gecko Warrior because I don't have anything in my trash anyway. And then I go ahead and play Luffy. Luffy discards 3,000 Worlds and Gravity Blade because the Gravity Blade sucks in this matchup. And then I draw a card. I play Sengoku. Sengoku draws me a 2k counter, so I swing I think it's like 5-5. I think it's like 5-5-6-6. And obviously that's absolutely massive. So I swing another 5, I believe, with my Jinbei to play around a what is it called? A Onami, and then I swing 6 with pudding to play around an Onami, and then I believe he takes this one right here. Yep, trying to trigger into something, or maybe just draw something good. Discards Raigo. I swing 6 into his life. He discards a beige. This is exactly where I want him to be, because even if he plays Yamato here, I can still just pressure him down a lot, and then also just red rock whatever he plays. Which is obviously super helpful right here. Like I said, if there is a route, this is the route right here. So he goes ahead and swings into the Jinbei. Jinbei goes down. He plays a Parasparrow Vanilla, and this is where like the game is pretty much over right here. So I'm swinging 5s over and over and over again. It's gonna, like, I could probably go for lethal right here, but for me there's no reason to, because like I can just take every card out of his hand, and because I'm not really feeling too much pressure, like I can win in that regard. So I think I swing 5 into his life right here. Yep, and then he takes it. And then he uses, if he didn't take it here, then I was going to play a Sengoku. But now I'm going to play the Sengoku anyway. And then I'm gonna actually never mind. I'm just gonna pass because I don't know why I didn't play the Sengoku. I think that was just a mistake. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I wanted there to be a reason if I didn't play Sengoku, but it was just a mistake. So he plays Ace, heals a life, and then gains that, and then it obviously gains Rush. So I'm gonna go ahead and swing 5 into his life with the Luffy just to see what he does. I think he's gonna take this one right here. I don't know if he's gonna take this or not. I don't remember why I swing 5 here, but I swing 5 here. I think it's because I wanted to keep my options open in case I play like Red Rock plus like something else. But I don't remember for sure. So I swing 5 here, and then he counters out, and then I swing 5 here, and then he counters out of this one. And then I could play Red Rock here, but I save it. So I just swing 10 into the Ace, and then it dies. And then I get the Gecko, and then Gecko gets back a 2k counter. And then I just win from there. All right, now it's time for the blue mirror plus blue doffy. What I'm going to be giving you is kind of tips into both of these matchups because it's just like, it's kind of like, it's very similar, except for there's a couple differences. I'll kind of point that out. We'll talk about blue doffy first. So blue doffy going first is like the most important thing because one, it takes them off their curve, and then two, being the first person to establish Mihawk and being the first person to be able to gravity blade is really important. And for those guys who don't know, the blue mirror is not like the black mirror where like the first person to establish a body usually loses. It's usually the first person to establish a body actually wins, because like for them to actually remove that big body, they have to use like Red Rock or some other type of card to establish it, to take away the what is it called, the Mihawk or like the Kaido or whatever big guy that you decide to play. And when they're doing that, they're usually not establishing a big body on their own, so you can just keep chain dropping big bodies over and over and over again. And this is why 10 drop Kaido, the draw dragon Kaido, actually I like that name. We're gonna start calling it draw dragon. Yeah, this is where the draw dragon's actually good, because if you play the draw dragon and then they bottom deck it, like you can just play another draw dragon, and like you pretty much just like win because you just draw 8 cards. Like how are they gonna win when you have like 13 cards in it? Or actually they can put in you, I guess, is what they could do. But like you can drop the draw dragon, and then they can Red Rock it, and then like you can just drop another body after that, and they just have to keep dedicating Dawn like a lot of their turn to actually playing these big bodies, or I'm sorry, to getting rid of these big bodies. And then the whole time like they're not actually establishing a board on their own, so like you can just put a lot of pressure on. I will say, if you are able to stick 2 bodies to the board, you pretty much just straight up win the game. 2 big bodies to the board, because they have just no answers for them, and they just keep swinging into their life. And obviously that's a huge deal, because you can bottom deck their blockers, and then their blockers won't matter. Plus you have access to Diable Jumble, so that's huge right there. So like I said, you want to go first in this matchup. You do need to be careful countering out too much though, because if you do over countered, like Doffy does swing for 7k and obviously establish the body at the same time. So if they swing 7k into you, then like you want to try to keep your characters on the board for as long as possible, because their characters come out rested. So if they're dedicating three Dawn to like actually playing a character, and you're able to like keep one of yours on the board, then like obviously that can contest their character that they play. On top of like, you don't like, now not only does it contest their character on their board, it takes cards out of their hand, but also like you don't have to dedicate Dawn to actually removing them with spells or like events, I guess. And you can actually use your Dawn to develop even more bodies that are gonna be harder for them to get rid of. Like I said, this is just a matchup of like who can establish the most bodies that the opponent can't get rid of, and then you just pretty much just like stack on top of them, and then you win the game. It's actually very similar to how Red Purple Law plays into like Gecko Moria, because Gecko Moria can't actually kill a bunch of bodies like every turn. So if you can just keep stacking up bodies over and over again with Red Purple Law into Gecko Moria, then that's how you win, because like they just don't have answers like consistently like Sakazuki might. So with that being said, you want to keep a Red Rock in your hand. Key cards in this matchup is, honestly, you want to have 2 Mihawks in this matchup. Obviously like BOA is decent, but like because it is in Gravity Blade Raging Tiger range, it's not as great. So if you are going second, it's a good option, but like it's gonna get Gravity Bladed, which does really suck. So BOA is not as good. But if you are going second, Jinbei plus Warlord's really good. Even if you're going first, Jinbei plus Warlord is good, because on 5 Dawn you can actually play it, and you don't have to actually play like 3,000 Worlds or something like that. So I guess the key cards in the matchup are Jinbei plus Warlord, which is obviously 2, double Mihawk, and then Gravity Blade Raging Tiger. If you're going, I guess is just the main 5 cards you're looking for. Pudding doesn't really matter too much in this game right here, unless they are playing the Draw Dragon. If you are playing against Doflamingo, they probably are playing draw dragons, so I would keep one in hand, just in case they do play it. And then you can go, you can play Red Rock and bottom deck the Kaido. Oh, real quick though, quick tip: before you play Pudding, make sure that you Pudding, and then before you play Pudding, make sure you don't Red Rock, because if you Red Rock and then play Pudding, they could draw back into the dragon you put at the bottom of their deck, because they shuffle their deck, obviously. So make sure that you play Pudding and then bottom deck with Red Rock, because it gives them less of an option to play another Kaido. Because if you Pudding and then they just drop another dragon, like, it's just really tough to actually come back from that, unless you have another Red Rock and another Pudding, which is unlikely, right? But yeah, so that is the important parts about that. Doflamingo, I'll go ahead and show you guys a game of Doflamingo versus BOA. But actually, real quick, before I do that, let me talk about the BOA mirror match real quick. The BOA mirror, oh, my computer just fell asleep. The BOA mirror match is very similar to the blue Doffy matchup. Is just the first person to establish bodies on the board usually wins. Being aggressive into their life is obviously really important, because they have a lot of removal. So if you like the trick into BOA is very similar to like Reiju, where if you attack really tall, it like forces them to get rid of a bunch of cards from their hand. And sometimes they they either don't want to get rid of a bunch of cards from their hand, or like they don't have the ability to, because their hand's bricked up. And once their hand is bricked up, they're not able to actually like draw off of their removal. And then you can like, especially if their hand's bricked up, you can just keep swinging really tall into them, and then you can just like basically like flood their hand with cards, and then you're pretty much just going to win from that point on. But also like establishing a big body is just really important, because they have to spend their entire turn dealing with it, and then you can just play another one. They have to spend their entire turn dealing with it over and over and over again. Hopefully you have a bunch of big bodies. My deck in particular only plays 6 big bodies. It plays 3 Mihawk, 3 BOA. So like this is where like Jinbei plus Warlord spam is obviously really good in the mirror match. Key cards in that matchup, obviously Jinbei plus Warlord goes second in that matchup as well. Gravity Blade, Raging Tiger, BOA Hancock is really good because it gets rid of their Sengokus, just things like that. So yeah, well, let's go into the game now. All right, this matchup is going to be a little bit of a long one. Most blue mirrors last pretty much forever. I end up drawing, I get a Perfume Femur, the Diable Jumble from the search, because like realistically, since I am going first, it's not like I really necessarily need the 4/6 Gecko right there. So it's like not really too good. And plus like I'd rather just like search, I'd rather just draw the 1-of, because I could actually need it later on in the game. And funny enough, it actually comes up. It's like the funniest thing. So he goes and plays Perona, which is obviously a really good start from him, and he rearranges his top cards. He draws, or obviously he passes his turn. I swing 5 into his life. I'm just going to do the classic 5/5. This is what a Newgate does as well on his 3-Dawn turn, because he doesn't really have a lot of options. So I'm going to swing 5/5. He's going to go ahead and discard a card, I believe. Discarding, probably, I think he just discards a Pudding, if I remember correctly here, which is smart, because my deck doesn't play, it plays very low to the ground, in terms of like hand size. So then he goes ahead and swings Perona into the Sengoku, which is smart, because I can obviously just use the Sengoku to gain draw power. And this is another problem, guys, is this deck can kind of stack up with, in terms of, this deck can really like stack up in terms of, what is it called? Like drawing bricks. So I am trying my best to be able to find cards that, can get me out of this situation. I decided to play the Jinbei into the Gecko here, because I need to establish bodies on the board, and then if whatever he plays next turn, I'm going to be able to just Gravity Blade it. So there's no reason, like I'm totally fine just taking like an extra life right here, if it means that like I can just bottom deck his board and actually gain control from that point on. Because at this point I'm going to be able, like, I'm going to Gravity Blade first, so I'm going to get rid of like both the bodies that he plays, like not only Crocodile, but I'm also going to get rid of whatever he plays from Doffy off the top of his life. And I'll be able to swing 3 5s, which is obviously really valuable. And then for like, he won't be able to deal with all of those on curve, luckily for me, right? Because at best, like, I mean, he could swing 6 into something. Actually, I think he does make a mistake this game. I'll talk about it in a second. But this is a little bit of a long one. I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward this a little bit. Anyway, he stacks his life, or he stacks his deck, swings 7 into me, plays a Crocodile. Here's my turn on 7 Dawn. I'm going to go ahead and play a Gravity Blade Raging Tiger after I swing a bunch of 5s into this Crocodile, or this, Crocodile right here. He lets it go, which is very good for me. And I go ahead and actually, because he let it go, I don't know why I did that actually. Why did I do that? I feel like Gravity Blade was actually just better there overall, wasn't it? So I swing a bunch of 5s here. I think I'm sorry guys, that was really weird. I realistically thought I was gonna Gravity Blade here, but I guess I just wasn't because his board wasn't as threatening, I guess. And I guess me establishing a big board is fine here. I guess playing another body, but me bouncing back that law I feel like wasn't actually the right play here. So that was a little bit of a goof on my part, I'm not gonna lie. I think Gravity Blade probably would have been better here, but then again, he could have just Gravity Bladed me back. Then again, he could probably do that anyway. He can probably just bottom deck. Yeah, that's not the right call, guys. That's not the right call. If I were to do that, I should have just kept the law in on the board to have another body that's like a 5k attack with 1 Dawn on him. But I knew that I think I didn't do that because I knew I was going to play Mihawk the next turn and I was going to be at 9 Dawn, so I wasn't going to actually be able to boost up law that turn. But here is where I actually go. Here's where I mess up too. Here's where he messes up. He swings 6 into it. He should have swung 3 5s because like the Doflamingo could have actually took another card out of my hand. But realistically, I didn't have another card in my hand, so he actually could have killed one of my guys. He could have killed my entire board actually here because he could have Gravity Bladed both of the Jinbeis and then he could have swung into the Gecko. And because I didn't have counter in hand, it actually would have gone through. Even if I did have counter in my hand, I would have had 1 less card, which is obviously important. So right here, I go ahead and I swing 5 into the Crocodile. I think he lets it go. I'm pretty sure he lets the Crocodile go. Unless he counters here. No, he lets it go. And this is where I play Mihawk, draw a card. And this is where you start winning the game, guys. Is because they have to dedicate a lot of Dawn to... damn it, I didn't have... what's it called? And this is where I should have kept the Pudding too, by the way. Because now he has 7 cards in hand. I could have definitely punished him for it. Actually he has 7 cards in hand. So Gravity Blade right here is obviously really nice, and then this is where I swing 5 into life. I get back I believe a 2k counter and I play just another body, and if he plays anything else then obviously I can just bottom deck it with the Mihawk more than likely. But if he plays another Draw Dragon, then this is obviously not great for me because I ran out of red rocks. But this is how you start winning the game normally, guys, is you're just able to establish a bunch of bodies on the board. I'm gonna fast forward this a little bit. He ends up actually taking the life, which is, I definitely did not expect him to do. But then I go ahead and play Gecko just to establish another body on the board and get back at 2k because my hand's running really low on 2ks, unfortunately. My hand's actually bricked up all the way to the end right here, which is definitely kind of annoying for me because, like I said, like I'm just not able to like protect my characters, and I'm also not able to like counter out of anything and like use my leader effect realistically. I've been able to use it a couple times, but it hasn't really been consistent, which isn't great. Sorry, I just got a message from somebody, and I was trying to check it because it was like a weird message. I like, it's not something you usually get every day. But anyway, I ended up playing Gravity Blade, bottom decking whatever he played. I wasn't paying attention. And I swing 6 and then 7. This is actually gonna be a common theme right here. Is like for the rest of the game, I'm just gonna swing 6 and 7. Oh, I'm sorry. He plays a BOA and I bottom deck it. Yeah, 6 and then 7. He goes ahead and takes it, and then I think he does another. I think he plays another BOA here, if I remember correctly. He doesn't draw Red Rock, which really sucks. If he would have drawn Red Rock, I think he possibly could have won this game. I do think like this is probably like a 55-45 into BOA's favored. So I do think it's favored, but I don't think it's heavily favored. I think it's like favored like Sakazuki is into Gecko, where it's like on paper it seems like it's like a favored matchup, but like they can easily win. There's like a lot of routes for Gecko to win it into Sakazuki. So yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward a little bit. Okay, but anyway, goes and puts 3 Dawn on Doflamingo, swings into the Gecko. I think I actually counter out of this because I want to get I think he's going to play another BOA, so I want to get the value off of the, what is it called? Out of the Gravity Blade. So I end up Gravity Blading. This is just really hurtful right here. Like, this really hurts him, being able to swing 6 and then 7 again. And because he wants to play around Perfume Femur, I think he, like, has to go down to, like, he can't go down to 0 life, unfortunately, which just really, really sucks. If he does go down to 0 life, then it's just... he kind of just loses because I can just go 15 into him the next turn. And this is where actually me searching Diable Jumble actually really helps. Also because he just doesn't draw a whole lot of counter either, or like almost no removal. He drew Gravity Blade, but he didn't draw Red Rock. And Red Rock would have been really good into this Mihawk. But me being able to keep the Mihawk on the board has been just absolutely just crazy. It's been absolutely crazy. This game actually lasts a while longer because I wasn't able to close out the game. I was like being a little bit too like pussy to close out the game, and I actually messed up the math right here where like I actually could have lost if I didn't draw a 1k counter out of my last life. For some reason, I don't know why, but I thought you can only swing like 10-11, which actually is the case, but like I forgot that Perona could actually put in a lot of work and like actually math me out of the game, and we'll talk about that in a second. But he ends up stacking his top deck, swinging 7 into me, playing a Jinbei playing a Weevil, which is a huge issue right here because I'm running very low on counter, and I don't really have a whole lot. And he swings 6 into me, and then I had to actually take it, which is really unfortunate. I should have probably countered out with 2 1Ks, but that would have given him a lot of information, which I didn't want him to have. And I debate. I think I swing 9 into life because I want to. No. I end up not doing that. I swing 9 into his Jinbei here. But what I should have done, guys, this is actually a huge mistake. I should have swung. I should have activated my Diable Jumbo and swung into his Jinbei for 9, and then I should have bottom decked the other. I should have bottom decked the Weevil. Which was like, it was just like really stupid. But right here, I actually messed up the math. I put him at 0 here, where realistically, I think I should have killed the Perona, because like the Perona actually messed up the math here a lot. I thought it was safe because I had 2 2Ks and 2 1Ks, but then I realized like if I counter out of this 10K attack, then I'm like actually like I have no cards in hand, and like the Perona can actually kill me, which I didn't expect him to actually be able to do. I thought he can swing like 10-10, which I was able to counter out of anyway, but because he was able to swing 10-11, this is actually really risky, because like I can get to 7, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, I have to have a 1K out of life, which is actually really risky. So this is a huge mistake on my part. But then again, like I didn't want him to like I didn't want him to be able to like what is it called, kill me. I didn't want him to be able to kill me. So what I should have done is I should have like played the gym. I should have swung into his Perona and then played the Jinbei just so I can have a body on the board. So he swings 10 here, and this is where I mess up right here, is because he can swing 11, but I have to take it. Because if I counter out, then he can swing with Perona for 5, and I don't have any counter for that. So luckily I drew a 2K out of life, but that only needed to be a 1K or a Gum Gum Rain, and I was completely safe. But still, like that's actually like messed up. That I actually almost lost because of that. But I do still think this matchup is favored. It was a very long matchup, and obviously he's a very good player, so it was close, and he was able to kind of make the best out of a bad situation. But I do think this matchup is favored, and we'll talk about the unfavored matchups now.